Okay, let's do this. It's my first live stream, so let's see how it goes. So, anyways, my name is John Pearl, and I am the co-creator of QA which is an open source end-to-end testing library, which basically sets up, it's like Create React app for end-to-end browser tests. What it does is it sets up the Playwright, Jest, and QA dev dependencies. For those who are not familiar, Jest is a very popular testing framework for JavaScript, and Playwright is it's a new and will likely become popular browser automation framework that was created from the same developers who made Puppeteer. The main difference between Playwright and Puppeteer is that it has WebKit and Firefox support, as well as Chromium. Additionally, they're adding auto-weighting APIs. So when you do page.click selector, it will automatically wait for that selector to be ready on the page. So what is QA Wolf? QA Wolf is a framework that automatically creates Playwright and Jest code for you just by you using the browser. So what I'm going to do today is I am going to set up end-to-end tests on this open source project called Flipt. Basically what I did is I searched on GitHub issues trying to figure out who would like help with end-to-end testing, and I reached out to the creator of Flipt had an open issue saying that he'd like to add end-to-end tests. So I reached out to Mark and asked, would you like some help with this? And that's where we are today. So today I'm going to set up and these end-to-end tests for Mark. What are end-to-end tests? End-to-end tests, okay, so there's like the testing pyramid, testing trophy, are two ways that you can look at different types of tests. Let me pull up the testing pyramid. But basically, end-to-end tests, they test your application like you're testing it on as a user. So it tests your entire application, your critical paths, the workflows that your application lets users perform. So let's say you're on Facebook, you can sign up on Facebook as a user, you can log in, and the way a user would interact with Facebook is they would use the browser to actually sign in. So end-to-end tests, they test your application like a user. They would click in the browser and test the whole stack of your application, versus the other end of the spectrum, you have unit tests, which would just test maybe one function of code and all of the different permutations. For end-to-end tests, you don't want as many end-to-end tests as you would want unit tests. For end-to-end tests, you just want a few that cover the critical paths of your application. The reason for that is because they end up testing your whole application stack, your UI, your backend, and everything in between. So it takes longer to run those tests. And the main thing that you're trying to test is you want to be testing the critical paths that your users want to use. So let's go check out Flipt, which is the point of this video. We're going to show you how to set up some end-to-end tests on a project. And first, let's understand, okay, what is Flipt? What would be some critical paths that we would want to test in the first place? So you can see that Flipt is a modern feature flag solution. What does that mean? What are feature flags? Well, basically every company I've worked for, when you want to release a new feature, you might not want all of your users to see that new feature or new variant right away. So first you might ship it to production with the feature flag turned off, and then whenever you're ready, you could turn on that feature. So, and there's different things you could do. So if you look at Flipt, it says that you can have advanced distribution rules. So maybe you only would turn it on for a small percentage of your users, and all kinds of different things. The reason that you might want a UI like this to actually manage your feature flags is because maybe you want to enable your product managers or other business owners on your team to decide when to turn on or off different features. And having a nice UI like this would be really nice. Pretty much everywhere I've worked, we've like built our own version of this, so it's smart to have an open source solution. So let's check out their GitHub and figure out how do we actually set this up, because we need to be able to run this, either have access to a URL that's running it, which I don't think they have a demo site, or just run it locally to be able to create these end-to-end tests. So if we look at their documentation, which I've checked out before, they have a way that you can run it in Docker. So that'll make it really easy. Let's first clone this repo so we can actually set up the end-to-end tests. So let me make sure. So I'm gonna clone this. And we'll just go ahead and create a branch for these end-to-end tests. So let's check out we're waiting for this to check out their project structure. Looks like they have a server and UI, so it's like a mono repo. They have the server in that folder, they have the front end in this folder. And okay, so it looks like they do have a test directory with probably unit tests. Yeah, these look like unit tests. So we'll go ahead and we're gonna create an end-to-end testing directory in the same UI tests directory. And the way we're gonna do that, let's go ahead and cd into Flipt. Okay. So we create a new branch end-to-end, and what we can do is I think they're actually using Yarn for this project. Let me double check that. So looks like they're using Yarn, there's two main package managers for Node. NPM is the default, it's bundled with Node, and then you have Yarn, which was built by Facebook and now maintained by somebody else, that is compatible with Node packages as well. So they're both kind of interchangeable. So they're using Yarn, so we're gonna do yarn create QA wolf. And I'm gonna make sure it's the latest. And what this is gonna do is this is going to set up, okay, I guess that does not work with Yarn, the @latest tag, but that's fine. We'll just do yarn create QA wolf and that'll be fine. Oh, okay, so here's our issue. It says cannot read package JSON. Okay, that's because we're not in the actual UI project that has the package JSON, which is the actual Node package. So let's try that again. Yarn create QA wolf. And okay, so it's asking us, where do we want to create the tests? So we know that they have their tests under __ tests. So I'm going to just keep them there, and we'll put it under end-to-end. And I'm going to skip this. No, we'll set up GitHub Actions. What is GitHub Actions? It's a CI in GitHub that allows you to run your code and run your tests. So maybe every time you push, you'd want to run your tests or something like that. And QA wolf will actually let you choose from that list. I should have taken a little bit more time there, but it lets you actually choose from that list which CI you want to use, and it will actually set up your test to run on that CI. We might need to configure it a little bit more, but at least it gives you sort of the boilerplate to get started. So what is it doing now? We can see that it added a few dependencies. It added Jest, Playwright, and QA wolf, like we talked about earlier. So Jest is the unit testing framework. Playwright is the browser automation driver. So it's the thing that actually controls Chrome, Firefox, and WebKit for you. So you can actually automate clicking like a user. And then QA wolf is the create React app. So it's like the bootstrapper of all of this. And it allows you to just use your application, and it will actually create code for you, create the Jest and Playwright code. So we can kind of use that as the starting point, and then if we want to edit the code, we always can as well. So we'll see what that looks like in a second. Playwright takes a while to install because for Playwright, it has to download 3 different custom browsers, Chrome, Firefox, and WebKit. So that's likely what we're waiting for. But let's go ahead and check out the project while we're waiting for this. I'm also streaming, so my bandwidth is probably, let me make this bigger. Let's look at this project. Okay, so we see that there's been some changes in this UI project. Created this QA Wolf workflow file for GitHub Actions. Now, since this was not the root level, we'll actually have to just move this up here into this project .github/workflows, and I'm gonna go ahead and disable this for now until we get the test running. We don't want to trigger the GitHub Actions. So we can go ahead and delete this. If you had run this at the root, if we had run this at the root of project, it would have put it in the right folder, but we ran it inside a UI. Okay, so what did QA Wolf do? It added these dev dependencies, QA Wolf. So we see Jest, and let's scroll down a little more, and we can see QA Wolf. And it created this QA Wolf config file where it's saying, okay, the tests are going to be here under __ tests /e2e, like end to end, and this project's not using TypeScript, so which it detected for us. Let's see what our, okay, cool. It is in, everything is installed. Let's go ahead and run Flipt and like play around with this project. So let's see, close some of this stuff. So we can see that they have a easy Docker file we can just get up and running with. So I'm gonna go ahead and run that. To wait for this to run, and let's kind of explore this application to come up with maybe one or two end-to-end tests. Okay. Looks like it is running. Let's go check it out. Okay, so that was easy enough. We can see on their UI there's two pages, or multiple pages, but these seem like the main two flag segments. So let's go ahead and, okay, let's see what happens when we click new flag. Okay, so it seems like we can create a new flag, so that might be a good test. And maybe we'll probably want to create a new segment as a test. Let's go ahead and start with that. So this is the URL. It's the localhost 8080. I'm going to get back to that directory, and what we can do to create a test is just npx, or okay, so I forgot they're using yarn QA Wolf create 8080, and we'll call this one, let's look at the way they're naming their files. Let's just stay consistent. So it looks, normally it's camel case. Okay, cool. They're doing camel case, so we'll just stay consistent with that. We'll call it create a flag, or create flag. And let's see what happens. Okay, so it launches the browser and it gives us a few options. I'm gonna make this a little smaller so we can see what's going on. Let's go ahead and look at the project while we do this. So we can see under tests E2E, there's this create flag test that was created. QA Wolf will actually create the test in real time as you do stuff, so we can actually use and edit the code as it creates it for us. So let's go ahead and click on new flag, and we'll see it added this await page click when we did that. Let's make this a little bit smaller. And let's say, what do we want to call this flag? Awesome feature. Okay, that's not super original, but you know, we gotta keep moving. And I'm gonna create this unenabled, or just disabled because that's the default. Let's go ahead and add a description. Our product manager cannot wait to ship this feature. Okay, so we can see what did it do here. See, I sort of misspelled it, so I had to backspace. And you can see that QA-Wolf is actually able to detect these special keys. You can't just call page.type if you want to type backspace. I'm going to leave this as is, but I'll edit the test afterwards. And it will still work. So let's go ahead and press create. And let's save this. And now the flag is updated. Let's actually, as part of this test, click on flags. So we should see it here. Okay. So I'm going to click save and exit. We'll go over some of this other stuff later. So let's see if this works. I mean, because QA-Wolf has to kind of guess at these selectors, which I'll explain the selector logic in a second, the test might not work right away. We might have to edit it. But what's cool is you have the code here, so we can do whatever we want. And actually, the way QA-Wolf works with selectors is the best practice is you should generally have like a test attribute on your elements, something like data-test ID. And when you have those attributes on your elements, then QA-Wolf will actually inline CSS selectors that target those. If you don't, then it falls back to its default HTML selector, which kind of serializes the DOM and does the best match that it can. So let's go ahead and let's try and run this test. I'm going to move this over to the right. And picks QA-Wolf test. And let's see what happens. Okay. So I probably change the flag. It's not unique. Okay. So our problem is that we don't have clean data right now. So this test is not going to pass. Let's go ahead and try and delete it in the UI, see if it would work if the database was fresh. And then either we have a few options here. We could decide to clear the database before the test, which is probably our best option because, it's probably our best option. You can do it after the test, but if the test fails, then it'll cause a problem for future tests. So let's run this again and see what happens. Okay, so it said passed, but that happened a little bit too fast. We can see that it worked. I'm going to go ahead and delete this again. I want to slow it down just because I want to see it. I'd like to see the test run, which I think is reasonable. If I remember correctly, Playwright has a slow-mo option that you can set it to slow down. So I believe it's on the browser. So QA-Wolf.launch is just really a shortcut for Playwright's different launch helpers. The only thing it does additionally to that is it lets you specify which browser with an environment variable. So that way you can write the same test for multiple browsers and then choose which test or which browser to run with the CLI. But let's go ahead and let's look. I know there is a slow-mo. I just don't remember which. If it's on the browser, on the context. So, okay, we can see it is on launch on this browser type.launch. Okay, so this should work. And if we look at slow-mo, it's going to slow down each Playwright operation by that many milliseconds. I'm going to do something really small for now. And then let's go ahead and run our test again. Now we should be able to see it actually run. So we can see it's typing that. Our product manager cannot wait to ship this feature. Oh, 2 backspaces, fixes it, saves, and it all worked. And we can refresh this and see that it was there. All right, so we actually have our first end-to-end test set up, and you can see how easy that was. Now, what I'd recommend if you actually look at these selectors, so it's serializing the whole DOM, and if the DOM changes too much, then they won't work. So the best thing we could do would be to actually change the UI so that we add these data attributes on the elements, and then that way it's very clear, okay, we got to make sure to keep this data attribute on our like new flag button. So even if we change it, at least as long as we keep that test attribute, then we won't need to update our tests. That's one thing that I would do, and I'm not sure we're going to do it in this video, maybe in a future video. And I'm going to go ahead and change this since we don't probably want the backspaces. We'd rather just fix the value here. So let's go ahead and put a new segment test while we're at it. So that was so quick. Just going to do the same thing. We are going to do yarn QA wolf create, which is equivalent to doing npx QA wolf create if you're just using Node. And we'll go ahead and call this create segment. So now what's going on here? I think I can explain that a little bit better. So how does QA wolf work sort of under the hood? Well, what it does is it creates this test file and then it just runs it with Jest right away. So these are it's just calling Jest and it's saying, okay, clear the Jest config. We do that in case you have a conflicting Jest configuration file, but you can change that in the QA wolf config, which I'll show you. So that's just coming from the default QA wolf config file, which if you remove this line, it'll just use your whatever config it finds. And that looks a little bit different using TypeScript. So it uses this basic reporter. QA wolf Jest reporter is like just a super basic. We have to do this because the Jest reporter, it interferes with the CLI prompts and the REPL. So if we look at this, what is the REPL? The REPL allows you to actually like run commands, run node code while you're creating the test. So we could actually use Playwright, and let's do, we're actually going to work on improving this, but I'll go ahead and do, I think, context. Okay, so that's the browser context, and we can do QAWolf.wait for page context, and we'll wait for the first page. So that'll give us the Playwright page. And now we have this Playwright page. We can actually like, try out different selectors. So we'll try and select the HTML element. Let me wait for that. Let element handle equal wait. You can see that it resolves. And I can just show you. Let's take that element and let's do like the tag name. I believe that's the DOM. Wait, okay, so you can see it's the HTML tag name for that element. So here we can just try out different selectors as we're creating the test. And if I do .exit, it's just a normal REPL. It'll bring us back to our little CLI prompt. So that's really useful if you want to figure out, okay, I want to write some custom code here. Let's just try it out in the REPL and then add it in here. And you can kind of do that as we create our test. But for now, we're just going to rely on the default test generation. So where are we? Okay, we are on the home page, and we're going to go ahead and click on segments. You can see that it clicked on that selector. We're going to click on new segment. We're going to say these are our power users, and power users, because maybe we want to enable our feature flag for our power users first. I am not, okay, description, they are our users that are willing to try out advanced functionality. Maybe early adopters would be a better one, but we'll go with this one. So segments created, and let's click on segments. We can see it. Now I'm going to go ahead and save and exit. All that really does is just removes that last little comment, which says QA wolf creating code here. You can actually move around that comment and it'll change where it inserts this code. So that's a little bit more advanced unnecessary. Let's see that this test runs. I'm going to go ahead and delete the segment because we learned from last time these are sort of unique keys and the test would fail. Let's go ahead and test. Let's test a specific test. So we can actually Whatever we pass argument-wise after npx QA test will just be passed straight on to Jest. We can actually see the Jest command that it is running under the hood. npx QA test is just a shortcut, so we can see that the test succeeded. I'm gonna want to do slow-mo again, but anyways, back to this. We can see here it says test chromium npx jest --config. It's specifying the root dir of the tests, the root directory, which we put under this end-to-end folder under the same test directory, and it is the test timeout of 60 seconds, which is also configured in the QA config file, and then it's running the specific create test, which Jest will do its matching logic and find this test. So we saw that worked well. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this, and then I wanna run it in slow-mo so we could see it run a little bit slower and see every action that it's doing. I'm gonna go ahead and remove slow-mo from here since we already confirmed that works. And let's run this one more time. Cool thing is that we wrote this test once, but because Playwright has support for Firefox and WebKit, and because this QA-Wolf launch, so we can see that that is working. And it's going slow because we specifically asked it to. And that worked well. Awesome. Now, what I was saying is that this QA-Wolf launch, it allows you to specify with an environment variable which browser to run on. So it does Chromium by default, but we can actually use the QA-Wolf CLI and say, let's run it on Firefox. I'm gonna go ahead and delete the segment again. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and clean up that test since I made that mistake and put like a bracket where I didn't really want that. Cool. So we could add some comments to this too, like, you know, like click the segment nav bar. The best thing to do would be just to, like I said, add data test attributes that sort of have that naming, and then it would be very clear what it's doing. Let's see, and then it's clicks on the new segment button, and then it clicks on the name. So we can kind of tell from here, okay, it's clicking on the segment name and it's saying power users, tabbing to the key, and then tabbing on to the description, and then it's now the create segment button. And then I believe this is clicking on the nav bar again. Yes, we can see that it's clicking on the click segment nav bar. So again, future video, we will show how to actually add data attributes, and we'll see what that looks like instead. But what's nice is that it'll just work out of the box. You know, you can create these tests, and worst comes to worst, you have to takes, you know, what, 30 seconds to re-record a new one. So if you just want to spin up some quick end-to-end tests and get a little bit more test coverage, it's nice to have it work out of the box. All right, let's see what happens when we try and run it on Firefox. Same test. Cross your fingers. So I launched on this side, and the slow-mo is still going, so we can see. Oh, is it the slow-mo going? Didn't seem like it. Okay, no, it looks like we never added slow-mo. Let's run that a little bit slower, and it did work. So I'm gonna go ahead and run it on let's run on Firefox again. Move it over from my other monitor. Let's see. Okay, segments, it types it in, the name tabs through there to the description, fills that in. Should press the create button, and then the segments button, and the test passed. So it's pretty cool. You know, we wrote one test and we get to test multiple browsers with it. So we created our first two end-to-end tests, which that, was pretty quick. I'd frankly never used this site before, and they're basic tests, but it will catch quite a bit. Let's say your database has problem with it, and you deployed a faulty migration. These sorts of tests could catch that because a lot of times, there's a concept, it's called smoke testing, and it originated, I believe, with plumbing or maybe with electronics. I forgot. There's like 2 origin stories to that. So with electronics, the first test that you would do would be to hardware. You just plug it in, and the test would be, does it catch on fire or not? So that was the smoke test. There's no point in sort of testing all the advanced functionality of your application if you first try and log in, or you first try and do something basic and it catches on fire. So what we created right here, they're sort of like smoke tests. Can we just create these flags and segments, and that'll actually catch quite a few bugs alone. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. I'll probably do another video to show how do we run these tests on CI, and we'll set up with Flipt, running their Docker, and actually running these tests against that in CI. Cool. Well, thanks so much. That was my first live stream. I hope it was informational, and we'll definitely do more of these. Have a good one.